The restaurant was buzzing with the usual lunchtime crowd, plates clattering, murmurs blending into a soft hum, and the occasional burst of laughter. Amid the chaos, Amara Johnson moved gracefully between tables, balancing trays of food with practiced ease. Her bright smile and confident steps made her seem like she belonged not just in the restaurant, but anywhere she wanted. Yet today something unusual was about to disrupt the routine she had come to rely on. He walked in like the room had slowed just for him. Tall, poised, with an intensity in his eyes that made the chatter around him fade. Jihoon Kim, a Korean man whose reputation preceded him even in whispers, entered accompanied by two sharply dressed assistants. He approached the hostess with a quiet authority and spoke in Korean, a language Amara didn't understand. "Excuse me," she said politely, leaning closer, hoping to catch a hint of his meaning. His tone was firm, almost commanding, and she felt her pulse quicken, not from fear but from intrigue. She studied him for a moment, noticing the subtle way he observed the room, as if measuring everything and everyone. When he repeated the order, expecting her to hesitate, she chose honesty. "I'm sorry, I don't speak Korean. Could you tell me in English?" Her voice was steady, polite, and somehow fearless. For a moment, Jihoon froze. His dark eyes widened slightly, as though no one had ever dared speak back to him like that before. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Amara, oblivious to the effect she had on him, smiled gently, holding his gaze without flinching. There was a shift in the air, an unspoken curiosity forming between them. Jihoon, who was used to control, felt a strange tug of interest. He cleared his throat, repeating his words slowly, this time in English. Amara listened carefully, then nodded, a soft confidence in her response. The encounter ended as quickly as it had begun, but neither could ignore the ripple it caused. Amara returned to her duties, glancing occasionally toward the table where he now sat quietly, watching her. Jihoon, meanwhile, was struck not by her beauty but by her courage, the rare kind that made him pause, reconsider, and perhaps admire. Little did either of them know, this fleeting lunchroom interaction was the beginning of a story neither would ever forget. The next day, Amara arrived at the restaurant with her usual mix of energy and focus. She liked the predictability of her mornings, the smell of fresh coffee, the warm hum of conversations, and the soft clatter of plates. But today, a quiet unease settled in her chest. She sensed it before she even saw him. Jihoon Kim walked in again, alone this time. No entourage, no fanfare. Just him, calm and controlled, as if he had a private rhythm that the rest of the world didn't share. He scanned the room, eyes locking onto hers almost immediately. Amara felt her heart skip a beat, not from fear, but from a strange awareness that this man, who seemed to command every space he entered, had noticed her. He approached her table slowly, speaking in Korean once more. Amara frowned slightly, trying to catch the meaning, but before she could even guess, he repeated his words in English, his tone precise yet pointed, as if testing her. "I don't understand," Amara replied again, her voice steady, refusing to show uncertainty. She held his gaze, aware of the silent challenge in his eyes. The air between them thickened with tension, an invisible dance of curiosity and willpower. Jihoon froze, not in anger but in surprise. No one had ever responded to him this way. Usually, people followed instructions without question, intimidated by his presence. But Amara, she was different. There was something in her honesty, her calmness, and her quiet confidence that made him pause. For a few seconds the restaurant seemed to disappear. Their eyes met, speaking a language of its own, one of intrigue, unspoken questions, and a silent acknowledgement of mutual respect. Amara's lips curved into a small, polite smile, almost playful, and Jihoon felt an unexpected warmth that he didn't fully understand. Finally, he nodded and stepped back, a subtle acknowledgement that he had been bested, not in conflict but in courage. Amara returned to her work, trying to appear casual, yet aware that something unspoken had passed between them. As Jihoon left the restaurant, he glanced back once more. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, a rare, almost imperceptible smile. Amara noticed it, and for reasons she couldn't yet name, her heart felt lighter. Some encounters, she realized, had a way of changing everything, even when nothing seemed to happen. The day after their tense lunchroom encounter, Amara couldn't shake the memory of Jihoon's piercing gaze. She had tried to focus on her work, but every clink of a glass or rustle of a menu made her glance toward the entrance. Something about him lingered in her thoughts, a mixture of curiosity and an unfamiliar warmth. Around mid-afternoon the door chimed, and there he was again. Alone, quiet, and noticeably calmer than the day before. Jihoon approached the counter with an envelope in his hand, his sharp features softened by an expression Amara couldn't quite read. I wanted to apologize for yesterday, he said, his voice lower than before, measured but sincere. I did not mean to intimidate you. Amara raised an eyebrow, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone. Most people who entered her restaurant carried confidence or arrogance, but Jihoon carried a careful, unfamiliar restraint. She smiled politely. That's okay, she replied softly. I just wasn't sure what you were asking for. Thank you for explaining. He handed her the envelope with a slight bow, almost ceremonious in the way he moved. Inside she found a simple card with a polite note, expressing his respect for her courage and professionalism. Amara felt her chest warm, not from the words themselves but from the thought behind them. Before he could turn to leave, she instinctively said, "Wait, thank you." It was a small gesture, but Jihoon hesitated. For a brief moment, the world outside the restaurant seemed to vanish. Then almost naturally they shared a hug. It was soft, careful, and fleeting, but in that brief contact, a silent understanding passed between them. It was a hug that didn't need words, one that conveyed respect, curiosity, and a growing sense of connection. Jihoon's arms were steady, protective, yet not overwhelming. Amara felt an unexpected calm settle over her. When they pulled back, both stepped away slowly, a quiet acknowledgement that this moment mattered. Jihoon gave a small nod, his eyes lingering on hers just a fraction longer than necessary before he left. Amara returned to her duties, a smile tugging at her lips. Something had shifted, an invisible thread had tied them together in a way she couldn't explain, and she sensed that their story was only beginning. The weekend arrived with a soft breeze that carried the scent of blooming flowers through the city streets. Amara had almost forgotten how different life could feel outside the hum of the restaurant, until she found herself walking beside Jihoon. He had invited her to a local cultural festival, a quiet escape from the world they each carried. Amara had hesitated at first, unsure why a man like Jihoon would want to spend time with someone like her outside the formal walls of the restaurant. Yet here she was, stepping alongside him into a world filled with colors, laughter, and unfamiliar melodies. As they wandered among food stalls and artisan tents, Jihoon's usual serious demeanor softened. He smiled, small, deliberate, but genuine, and Amara couldn't help but smile back. She noticed the way his eyes lingered on simple things, the sway of a dancer's skirt, the flutter of paper lanterns, the delicate art of a calligraphy booth. You seem different here, Amara said lightly, teasing but careful. I like it, he replied after a pause, choosing his words slowly. It's quieter, safer in a way. His gaze met hers, and for a moment the weight of his other life, rumors, whispers, shadows, fell away. Amara felt a strange sense of trust forming. Here, away from his world of power and intimidation, he was just Jihoon, a man who appreciated small joys and had a thoughtful side few ever saw. She laughed at a playful game and he laughed with her, soft and unguarded. As the festival lights flickered against the evening sky, Amara noticed a moment of hesitation in Jihoon. Without thinking, she reached out slightly. He responded instinctively, wrapping her in a gentle hug. Not rushed, not forced, just a quiet embrace that conveyed warmth, trust, and comfort. It was different from their previous hug. This one felt lighter, more open, a recognition that neither had to hide entirely from the other. Amara rested her head briefly on his shoulder, and Jihoon's hold was steady, protective without dominating. Around them, the festival continued, but for a heartbeat, they were alone. When they pulled back, Amara smiled, her heart a little lighter than before. Jihoon's eyes met hers again, lingering longer than before, and she sensed an unspoken promise, a curiosity about what could come next. The week after the festival felt different for Amara. She moved through her shifts at the restaurant with a quiet distraction, her thoughts constantly drifting to Jihoon, the way he had smiled, the gentle hug they shared under the lanterns, and the unusual warmth she had felt in his presence. But curiosity often comes with consequences. One evening, while clearing a table near the back of the restaurant, Amara noticed a small envelope tucked under a menu. Her name wasn't on it, but something about the handwriting made her heart skip. She opened it carefully, finding a series of business cards and a note written in Jihoon's precise, neat script. The note was polite and simple, yet the cards revealed more than she was prepared to see, names and titles that hinted at power, influence, and danger. Her chest tightened as she realized Jihoon's world wasn't just about polite gestures and quiet smiles. There were secrets, a life she hadn't known, a shadow she hadn't been part of. Her first instinct was fear. She tried to shake the thought away, telling herself she was reading too much into it. But deep down she understood. Jihoon carried burdens most people couldn't imagine. And she cared enough to feel the weight of them. Before she could decide what to do, the door chimed. Jihoon had returned, his expression immediately softening when he saw her. He sensed the tension, the uncertainty in her stance, and without a word, he approached. "I see you found something," he said quietly, his voice calm but serious. Amara's eyes met his, unsure. I didn't mean to pry. I just wanted to understand." Jihoon nodded, then did something he hadn't done before. He pulled her into a protective hug. It wasn't casual, it was steady and grounding, as if to say, "I won't let you fall into fear because of me." Amara rested her head on his shoulder for a heartbeat, feeling an odd mixture of comfort and vulnerability, knowing she was safe with him in that moment. When they stepped apart, Jihoon's eyes held hers longer than usual. There were no words, but Amara felt a silent trust forming between them. Trust that could weather secrets, fears, and the unknown. For the first time, she realized their connection went beyond curiosity or attraction. It was something deeper, a bond that began in courage and now grew through understanding. The following weekend, Amara woke with a rare sense of calm. For once, her thoughts weren't racing, and the memory of Jihoon didn't bring anxiety or tension. Instead, there was a quiet curiosity, a sense that the world could hold something light and ordinary, even for someone like him. He had suggested meeting at a small tucked-away cafe he frequented, a place where the air smelled of warm coffee and baked bread, and the noise of the city softened to a gentle hum. Amara arrived first, smoothing her apron over her casual clothes, her heart beating with anticipation. Jihoon walked in shortly after, unaccompanied and surprisingly relaxed. Gone was the aura of power and control, replaced by something simpler, a man who appreciated quiet corners and a good cup of tea. He greeted her with a small nod, and she smiled in return, noticing for the first time the faint warmth in his expression that only seemed reserved for her. They ordered drinks and sat near the window watching people pass by. Conversation flowed naturally. They spoke of childhood memories, favorite foods, and small dreams they had long shelved. Amara laughed softly at Jihoon's dry humor, and he leaned back, seemingly savoring the sound of her laughter like a rare melody. The day was ordinary in the best way, a contrast to the shadows that often surrounded Jihoon. He talked about books he liked, about the quiet streets he walked at night, and about small acts of kindness he noticed in strangers. Amara listened, feeling layers of his personality unfold, layers no one at the restaurant had glimpsed. When it was time to leave, Amara felt a tug of hesitation. Jihoon noticed immediately. Without a word, he stood, closing the space between them, and enveloped her in a gentle hug. It wasn't urgent or protective like before, it was calm, warm, and reassuring. She rested her head briefly against his shoulder, feeling a sense of ease she hadn't known she could with anyone. As they pulled back, Jihoon gave her a small, almost shy smile. "Until next time," he said simply. Amara nodded, a soft smile tugging at her lips. She walked away with a lighter heart, realizing that moments like these, ordinary, peaceful, and shared, were the ones that built trust and connection. The world outside was loud and complicated, but in that quiet cafe, between laughter and shared stories, a fragile, steady bond had begun to form. It started as an ordinary evening at the restaurant, but for Amara, the calm she had felt during their cafe outing began to waver. While serving tables, she spotted Jihoon seated at a corner booth, talking quietly with a man she didn't recognize. Her chest tightened, a pang of unease creeping in. She tried to focus on her work, telling herself it was nothing, just business, nothing to read into, but her eyes kept drifting back. The man's hand gestured animatedly, and Jihoon's posture, usually so closed and controlled, seemed slightly different, almost friendly. When Jihoon noticed her glance, his expression softened, but he didn't immediately come to her. A misunderstanding had planted seeds of doubt in Amara's mind. She walked over, trying to mask her worry with a polite smile. "Is everything okay?" Jihoon asked, finally standing to meet her. His voice was calm, but his eyes searched hers, sensing the subtle tension. Amara hesitated, unsure if she should voice her fears. I just wasn't sure who that was," she admitted, her tone careful. "I thought, maybe you weren't being honest with me." Jihoon's brow furrowed slightly, then softened. He stepped closer, closing the small distance between them, and gently pulled her into a reassuring hug. It was steady and warm, a silent promise that everything would be okay. Her worries began to melt into the comfort of his arms. "Amara," he said softly, his voice low but certain, I never want you to doubt me. I understand why you felt uneasy, but you can trust me. She rested her head on his shoulder, taking in the calm steadiness of his presence. The world outside, the chaos, the noise, the judgments, faded, leaving only this quiet moment of understanding. When they finally stepped apart, Amara looked into his eyes and saw sincerity reflected there. For the first time she realized that trust wasn't built in grand gestures, but in small acts of reassurance. Moments like this hug, this steady presence, and his unwavering honesty. The tension that had weighed on her lifted, replaced by a deeper connection, stronger than before. In that moment, Amara understood that challenges might come, but together they could face them. The evening air was cool as Amara stepped out of the restaurant, the city lights reflecting softly on the wet pavement. She felt an unusual flutter in her chest, a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Jihoon had asked to meet her after her shift, a rare request that made her heart race. When she arrived at the quiet courtyard behind the building, he was already there, leaning against the railing. The usual intensity in his dark eyes was softened tonight, replaced by something deeper, more vulnerable. Amara's steps slowed instinctively, sensing the significance of this moment. Amara, Jihoon began, his voice low and measured. He paused, searching her eyes as if gathering courage. I need to tell you something. Her breath caught. She had felt a growing bond with him over the past weeks, yet hearing him speak like this made her pulse quicken. Yes, she asked softly, her own curiosity mingled with a quiet fear of rejection. I've realized that I care about you, more than I expected, he admitted, his usual composure slipping just enough to reveal honesty. You're not just someone I admire or respect. I think I've fallen in love with you. Amara's chest tightened. She had felt the same pull, the same quiet affection growing inside her, but fear of his dangerous world had kept her silent. Now, hearing him speak so openly, she felt a warmth spread through her, as if the air between them had shifted. I feel the same, she whispered, her voice steady but soft. I've been afraid, but I can't deny it anymore. Jihoon's expression softened, relief and joy flickering across his features. Slowly he stepped closer, and Amara instinctively moved toward him. They shared a long, slow hug, lingering in a space where words were unnecessary. Her head rested lightly against his chest, and his arms wrapped around her in quiet reassurance, a promise of care and understanding. For a few moments the world outside, the shadows, the whispers, the danger, didn't matter. There was only this connection, steady and true, built on trust, courage, and the fragile beginnings of love. When they finally parted, Jihoon's hand brushed hers lightly. No words were needed, their hearts had spoken for them. Rain fell in soft sheets over the city, turning the streets slick and reflective. Amara pulled her coat tighter around her as she walked toward the small cafe where Jihoon had asked to meet her. The sound of the rain mirrored the nervous flutter in her chest. Tonight felt different, heavier, yet full of possibility. Jihoon was already there, standing near the entrance, his hair damp from the drizzle. His usual composed presence carried a quiet urgency tonight. As she approached, his dark eyes met hers, and she could see the weight of decisions and responsibility pressing on him. I've been thinking, Jihoon began, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. About us. About my life and about what matters most. And I've realized that I can't keep living in a way that separates us. Amara's heart raced. She had feared this moment, the possibility that his world, so full of shadows and obligations, would always keep them apart. Yet here he was, choosing honesty, choosing her. I want us, he continued. I want to face whatever comes, together. If you're willing to trust me. Amara stepped closer, rain dripping from the edges of her coat. I do, she said firmly. I trust you and I want to be with you. Without hesitation, Jihoon closed the distance, and they embraced in the pouring rain. The hug was long and steady, a promise that they were choosing each other despite everything. Amara felt the warmth of his arms, the steadiness of his presence, and the courage that came from knowing they would face life together. For a moment the world melted away, the noise, the danger, the obligations. There was only the rain, the steady beat of hearts, and the quiet declaration of trust. When they finally pulled apart, water dripping from their hair and coats, their eyes met with a shared understanding. This was no fleeting connection. This was a bond strong enough to withstand anything. Amara smiled through the rain, her heart lighter, stronger. Jihoon returned the smile, and in that moment, both knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had chosen each other. The morning sun poured through the large windows of Jihoon's apartment, casting a golden glow over the quiet space. Amara sipped her coffee, watching the steam curl upward, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known she could have. For once, there were no shadows lurking, no whispers of danger, just the simple joy of being together. Jihoon stood by the window, his gaze soft as he looked at her. The usual intensity in his eyes had softened over the weeks, replaced by warmth, admiration, and a quiet contentment. He stepped closer, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Morning," he said simply, his voice calm, familiar, and grounding. "Morning," Amara replied, smiling. She felt the love between them, steady and real, as if every challenge, every awkward encounter, every small hug along the way had built to this moment. They moved through the day with ease, sharing laughter, stories, and quiet touches that had become second nature. There was a comfort in routine now, a sense that the world could be simple and kind when shared together. As evening approached, Amara looked at Jihoon and felt a wave of gratitude. They had faced tension, misunderstandings, and secrets, but they had also built trust, courage, and a love that was patient and strong. She stepped closer, resting her head lightly against his chest. Jihoon wrapped his arms around her in a warm, lingering hug. It was different from the first, different from the hesitant hug in the rain, different even from the protective one when secrets were revealed. This hug was complete. It was home, safety, and forever all at once. For a long moment, they simply held each other, hearts beating in quiet harmony, the world outside continuing without notice. There were no words necessary. Everything that had been said, felt, and lived was in that embrace. When they finally pulled back, their smiles reflected the depth of their journey. Amara and Jihoon had found not just love, but a partnership built on respect, courage, and unwavering trust. They had chosen each other, and would continue to choose each other every day forever.